The security camera blinked at me mockingly as I stood outside my own apartment, still wearing my bartender uniform after a grueling 12-hour shift. My feet ached, my back was killing me, and all I wanted was to collapse into my own bed. Instead, I was staring at my father's weathered face through the doorbell camera, trying to process what he just told me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I mean it, Olivia, he continued, his trembling hands fidgeting nervously. I had no choice. This apartment belongs to Vincent now, and you were never supposed to know. The gambling debts, they just kept piling up. The bile rose in my throat as my father's face filled the small screen. My own front door locked against me. 3 cardboard boxes with my clothes spilling out sat beside the door. They hadn't been there when I left for work this morning. I could see some of my belongings hastily shoved in without care. The photo album from my childhood, the small jewelry box my mother had given me before she passed, books I'd collected over years. My name is Olivia Mitchell, and at 29, I was living through every daughter's worst nightmare. But unlike most women in my position, I'd seen this coming from a mile away. James Mitchell had been struggling with his gambling addiction since my mother died 7 years ago. It started small: weekend trips to the casino, sports betting with colleagues, online poker games that stretched into the early morning hours. But over the past year, things had escalated dramatically. He'd gone from recreational gambling to full-blown addiction, disappearing for days at a time, only to return with hollow promises and empty pockets. And tonight was clearly his grand finale. I shifted my weight, adjusting my grip on my work bag as I maintained eye contact with the camera. "Where's my name on the deed?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I'd like to hear how this is legal." My father's laugh crackled through the speaker, a hollow sound devoid of any real humor. "It's not there anymore. Vincent's lawyers took care of everything. He's been very understanding about my situation." The way he emphasized understanding sent a chill down my spine. Vincent Romano was not known for his understanding nature. As the owner of the Sapphire Casino downtown, he had a reputation for collecting debts through any means necessary. "You're telling me you gambled away my apartment? The one I've been paying the mortgage on for the last 5 years?" I struggled to keep my voice level, but the tremor of rage was unmistakable. My father had always been on the title, a decision I'd made when I was young and naive, believing it would give him some stability after Mom died. Now that misplaced trust had cost me everything. "There are some boxes on the porch with your things," my father continued, ignoring my question. "Take them and leave, Olivia. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Vincent's men will be here in an hour to change the locks again." The casual way he dismissed me, his only daughter, made something snap inside me. I took a deep breath. "Dad," I said calmly, "I'm going to give you one chance to open this door and explain what's really going on, because right now you're committing several crimes, and I don't think you want me to start listing them." He scoffed. "Crimes? This is my property. The deed has my name on it. I have every right to sell it to cover my debts. This is my home." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "I've paid every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every repair cost, for 5 years. What you're doing right now is theft, fraud, and I'm pretty sure whatever deal you made with Vincent isn't exactly on the up and up either." There was a pause, and I could almost see the wheels turning in his head. "Vincent told me this was the only way," he said finally, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice now. "He said if I signed over the property, all my debts would be forgiven. Clean slate, Olivia. Don't you see? I can finally start over." I closed my eyes briefly, trying to control the fury and disappointment threatening to overwhelm me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "And what about me, Dad? Where am I supposed to go? What about my fresh start?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't considered me at all. In the calculus of his addiction, I was simply collateral damage, a necessary sacrifice to feed the beast that had consumed him. "Would you like me to have my lawyer explain it to you?" I asked, already pulling up Maya's number on my phone. "She'd be happy to walk you through exactly how much trouble you're in right now. How much trouble Vincent's in, too, for that matter." Loan sharking, coercion, property fraud. I'm sure the police would be very interested. You're bluffing, my father snapped, but I could hear the fear creeping into his voice. Vincent would never let you get away with threatening him. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. I'm not bluffing, Dad, and I'm done talking through a camera. You have exactly 30 minutes to open this door and explain exactly what kind of deal you made with Vincent before I call the police. Your choice. I turned and walked back to my car, settling into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking slightly as I pulled out my phone, but my mind was clear. I'd been preparing for something like this ever since last Christmas, when I'd caught my father searching through my desk drawers for my emergency cash. I started documenting everything after that. Every unexplained absence, every suspicious withdrawal from our once shared account, every time he'd asked to borrow money with increasingly desperate excuses. I called Maya, my lawyer and closest friend since college. She picked up on the second ring. Let me guess, she said, the sounds of her law office humming in the background. Your dad finally crossed the line. He sold my apartment to Vincent Romano to cover his gambling debts, I replied, watching the front door. He's barricaded himself inside with some story about Vincent's men coming to change the locks in an hour. Maya's sharp intake of breath was followed by the sound of typing. Vincent Romano, the casino guy? Jesus, Olivia, that's… I know. I cut her off. Can you pull up my financial records? All the mortgage payments, the renovations, everything that proves I'm the one who's been paying for the apartment. Already on it, Maya replied, keys clicking rapidly in the background. But if your dad's name is the only one on the deed, this gets complicated. Even if you've been making the payments, legally speaking. I need to know what I'm working with, I interrupted. And I need to know fast. Vincent's not the type to play by the rules. And if he thinks he's got legitimate claim to my place… I let the sentence hang, both of us knowing what it implied. Vincent Romano hadn't built his empire by being patient or forgiving. If he believed the apartment was now his property, he wouldn't hesitate to enforce that claim, through legal channels or otherwise. Give me 20 minutes, Maya said. Don't do anything rash until we have a plan. After hanging up with Maya, I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I'd hoped I'd never have to use. Elena Romano, Vincent's daughter and, surprisingly, a regular at the upscale bar where I worked. We weren't friends exactly, but there was a mutual respect between us, the kind that forms when you've seen someone at their most vulnerable. I'd helped her through more than one rough night, listened to her frustrations about her father's business, kept her secrets when she'd needed someone to trust. She picked up on the fourth ring. Olivia? Her voice was guarded, surprised. Is everything okay? Not really, I replied, watching as the lights flicked on and off inside my apartment. My father was clearly agitated, probably trying to figure out his next move. I need to talk to your father. It's urgent. There was a long pause. This sounds serious. It is. My father… He made some kind of deal with Vincent, involving my apartment. I swallowed hard. Elena, I've worked double shifts for 5 years to keep that place. It's all I have left of my mom. I just need 10 minutes with your father to sort this out. Where are you now? She asked, her voice softer. Outside my apartment. My dad's locked himself inside, says Vincent's men are coming to change the locks in less than an hour. She swore under her breath. Stay there. Don't call the police yet. I'll handle this. The line went dead before I could respond. The next 30 minutes were the longest of my life. I watched the sun begin to set, casting long shadows across the small garden I'd planted last spring. My mother's roses were just beginning to bloom, pale pink blossoms that she'd loved so much. The thought of losing them, of losing everything she'd left behind, made my chest ache with a pain so intense I could barely breathe. Just as I was about to call Maya back, a sleek black car pulled up behind mine. The driver's door opened, and Elena stepped out, followed by a tall, imposing man in an impeccable suit. Vincent Romano himself. My stomach twisted with a mixture of fear and determination as I got out of my car to meet them. Ms. Mitchell. Vincent nodded curtly, his eyes assessing me with cold calculation. My daughter tells me we have a situation that requires my personal attention. I straightened my shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. Your business arrangement with my father involves property that isn't his to sell. I've been paying the mortgage on that apartment for 5 years. Every payment, every repair, every utility bill. It's all been me. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. Your father has accumulated a significant debt at my establishment. He offered the property as collateral. The paperwork he provided showed him as the sole owner. He's an addict, I said simply. And he's desperate. Whatever he told you, whatever he showed you, it wasn't the full story. I pulled out my phone, opening the folder of financial documents I'd meticulously maintained. I have proof of every payment I've made. The apartment may be in his name, but I'm the one who's kept it. Vincent took the phone, scrolling through the records with practiced efficiency. His face remained impassive, but I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Elena stepped closer to her father, murmuring something I couldn't hear. He nodded once, then returned my phone. "Come to my office tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., he said finally. "Bring your lawyer and all documentation you have regarding the property. Perhaps we can find a mutually beneficial resolution." He turned to go, then paused. "In the meantime, my men will not be changing any locks tonight. You have my word." Relief washed over me, but I knew better than to show it. In Vincent's world, vulnerability was a weakness to be exploited. And my father? I asked, glancing toward the apartment where the front curtain had shifted slightly. He was watching us. "What happens to James Mitchell is not my primary concern at this moment," Vincent replied, his tone dismissive. "But for tonight, he remains in your debt, not mine. What you choose to do with that information is your business." With that, he returned to his car, leaving Elena standing before me. "Thank you," I said quietly. She shook her head. "Don't thank me yet. My father doesn't do favors, Olivia. He finds angles. Be careful tomorrow." Her warning hung in the air between us as she followed her father into the car. As they drove away, I turned back toward my apartment, a new determination hardening within me. My father was still watching through the window, his face pale and drawn. I walked back to the front door, pressing the intercom button. "Open the door, Dad. We need to talk." There was a long pause, then the sound of the lock disengaging. When the door swung open, I barely recognized the man standing before me. James Mitchell had always been tall and broad-shouldered, a former construction worker with calloused hands and a booming laugh. The man who stood in my doorway now was a shadow, hunched shoulders, sallow skin, eyes darting nervously past me to the street where Vincent's car had been moments ago. "What did you do?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Do you have any idea who that man is? What he's capable of?" I pushed past him into the apartment, taking in the scattered papers on the coffee table, the half-packed boxes, the general disarray of a life being hastily dismantled. "I know exactly who he is," I replied, turning to face my father. "The question is, do you understand what you've done? You tried to sell my home, the home I've been paying for, to cover your gambling debts." He collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "You don't understand, Olivia. I was in too deep. They were threatening me. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," I said, my voice gentler than I'd intended. Despite everything, this broken man was still my father, the same person who had taught me to ride a bike, who had held me through the nights after Mom died, who had once been the center of my world. "You could have come to me. We could have figured something out together." He laughed bitterly. "Come to you? After everything I've already taken from you? Your college fund? Your savings? I've been nothing but a burden since your mother died." The raw pain in his voice cut through my anger, leaving behind a complicated tangle of emotions I wasn't ready to unravel. "We have a meeting with Vincent tomorrow morning," I said instead, focusing on the immediate problem. "I need you to tell me exactly what kind of agreement you made with him. Every detail, Dad. No more secrets." Over the next hour, the full story emerged in halting, shameful admissions. My father had accumulated over $150,000 in gambling debts to the Sapphire Casino. When he couldn't pay, Vincent had initially offered a payment plan with exorbitant interest. But as the debt continued to grow, Vincent's patience had worn thin. It was one of his enforcers who had suggested the property deal, a clean solution that would wipe the slate and give Vincent a valuable piece of real estate in a rapidly developing neighborhood. My father had provided the deed showing his name, some falsified income statements, and signed whatever papers were put in front of him. The deal had been finalized just 3 days ago. I was going to tell you, he insisted, though we both knew it was a lie. After everything was settled, I thought I could find us another place. Something smaller, maybe. I closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me. I need you to pack a bag, I said finally. Tonight, you're going to stay with Uncle Rob. My father's younger brother had been trying to get him into rehab for years. Tomorrow, after the meeting with Vincent, we're going to have a longer conversation about what happens next. Olivia, please, he began, desperation edging into his voice. I can fix this. I just need a little more time. I shook my head, feeling a strange calm descend over me. No, Dad, no more time. No more chances to fix things on your own. That's what got us here in the first place. I picked up my phone again. I'm calling Uncle Rob. Go pack what you need for a few days. As I watched my father shuffle toward the bedroom, shoulders slumped in defeat, I wondered how we had arrived at this point. How the strong, loving man who had raised me had been reduced to this, a slave to an addiction that had consumed everything good in him. But somewhere beneath the anger and disappointment, a small voice reminded me that addiction was a disease, not a choice. The father I loved was still in there somewhere, buried beneath years of grief and self-destruction. I just didn't know if I had the strength to dig him out again. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful spring day that seemed to mock the turmoil of the previous night. Maya arrived at my apartment early, her professional demeanor firmly in place as she reviewed my documentation one last time. "This is solid," she said, organizing the papers into a leather portfolio. "The consistent payment history, the improvements you've made to the property, the fact that you've been the sole occupant for most of the ownership period, it all strengthens your case. But legally?" I pressed, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it anyway. She sighed, pushing her glasses up on her nose. "Legally, if your father's name is the only one on the deed, he had the right to sell it. But," she added quickly, seeing my face fall, "there are mitigating factors. If we can prove he was not of sound mind due to his addiction, or that he was coerced, or that Vincent knew the property wasn't truly your father's to sell, we have options." I nodded, gathering my courage as we prepared to leave. The drive to the Sapphire Casino took less than 20 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another world. The gleaming glass and steel structure rose from the heart of downtown like a monument to excess, a temple where dreams were bought and sold for the price of a chip, where fortunes were made and destroyed on the turn of a card. Vincent's office was exactly what I'd expected: opulent, tasteful, designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. He rose from behind an enormous desk as we were shown in, gesturing to the chairs opposite him. "Ms. Mitchell, right on time." His gaze shifted to Maya. "And you've brought counsel." "Very prudent. This is Maya Patel." I introduced them as we took our seats. "She's representing my interests in this matter." Vincent nodded, then pressed a button on his desk. Moments later, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit entered, carrying a similar leather portfolio to Maya's. "My legal advisor, Mr. Diaz," Vincent explained. "Now, shall we get down to business?" Over the next hour, both sides laid out their positions. Maya presented my financial records, the improvements I'd made to the property, evidence that I had been the de facto owner in all but name. Mr. Diaz countered with the legally binding sale agreement my father had signed, the clear title showing him as sole owner, the finalized transfer documents. Throughout it all, Vincent remained impassive, occasionally asking a clarifying question but otherwise letting the lawyers debate the technicalities. Finally, when both Maya and Mr. Diaz had exhausted their arguments, Vincent held up a hand, silencing them both. "This situation is unusual," he said, his eyes fixed on me. "Your father's debt is substantial. The property, according to current market values, exceeds that amount by approximately $75,000. He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Ms. Mitchell, why should I relinquish a legally acquired asset that represents a significant profit margin for my business?" I met his gaze steadily. "Because it was never my father's to sell. Because I've spent 5 years of my life building a home there. Because the law might be on your side, but morality isn't." A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's lips. "Morality is a flexible concept in my business, Ms. Mitchell." "Then how about practicality?" I countered. "A protracted legal battle will be costly and time-consuming for all parties. Even if you win in the end, the property will be tied up for months, maybe years. And there's the matter of potential negative publicity. Casino owner evicts hard-working young woman from her home to cover gambling addict's debts. Not exactly the image you want for the Sapphire, is it?" Vincent's expression didn't change, but I could see I'd struck a nerve. The Sapphire Casino had been working hard to rebrand itself as an upscale entertainment venue, not just a gambling den. A messy public dispute would undermine those efforts significantly. "You make some interesting points," he conceded after a moment. "Perhaps there is room for negotiation after all." He glanced at Mr. Diaz. "Give us the room, please. Both of you." Maya looked at me questioningly and I nodded. She and Mr. Diaz gathered their materials and exited, leaving me alone with Vincent. Once the door closed behind them, Vincent's demeanor shifted slightly. Not exactly relaxed, but less formal. "Elena speaks highly of you," he said, surprising me. "She says you've been kind to her, discreet. Those are qualities I value." I remained silent, unsure where this was heading. "Your father's addiction has cost you both dearly," he continued. "I've seen it countless times in my business. People destroying their lives, their families, for the next hand, the next roll of the dice." There was something in his voice I hadn't expected. Not quite sympathy, but perhaps understanding. "What if I told you there was a way for both of us to get what we want?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "The debt cleared, your home secure, and a lesson learned that might prevent future indiscretions." "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "The paperwork Mr. Diaz presented is genuine. But what I didn't mention is that the final transfer has not yet been recorded with the county. Technically, the property is still in your father's name." He steepled his fingers. "I could misplace that paperwork. In exchange, you would take over your father's debt. Not the full amount, but a percentage. Say, $50,000, payable over 5 years. I blinked, doing quick mental calculations. It would be tight, but manageable with my current income. "And the deed?" I asked. "I want it transferred solely to my name. My father can't have any legal claim to the property moving forward." Vincent nodded. "That can be arranged. My legal team will draw up the necessary documents today." He paused, studying me. "There's one more condition. Your father is banned from all my establishments, the casino, the restaurants, the hotel, permanently. He needs help, Ms. Mitchell. Not another chance to lose what little he has left." Relief and suspicion warred within me. "Why?" I asked finally. "Why offer this compromise? You're under no obligation to help me." Vincent was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Let's just say I recognize the value of family," he said eventually. "And the destructive power of addiction. I've seen too many lives ruined by what we offer in this building." He gestured toward the window, overlooking the casino floor below. "It's business, yes, but there should be limits. Lines that shouldn't be crossed." I sensed there was more to his decision than he was saying, but I wasn't about to question my good fortune. "I accept your terms," I said, extending my hand across the desk. Vincent's grip was firm as we shook on the agreement. "One last thing," he added as I rose to leave. The payment for your father's debt. I don't want it in cash. I frowned, confused. Then how? Your bar runs a scholarship program for service industry workers pursuing higher education, does it not? I nodded, surprised he knew this detail. It was a small initiative I'd helped establish 2 years ago, inspired by my own struggle to afford college. I want the $50,000 directed there, in monthly installments as we discussed. Consider it an investment in prevention rather than treatment. For the first time since I'd met him, Vincent Romano smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features. Addiction thrives on desperation, Ms. Mitchell. Perhaps by creating opportunities, we can reduce the number of desperate souls who find their way to my tables. As I left the Sapphire Casino that morning, legal agreement in hand, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief, exhaustion, lingering anger at my father, and a newfound respect for the complicated man I'd just negotiated with. Vincent Romano was not the one-dimensional villain I'd expected. Like all of us, he contained multitudes, capable of both ruthless business decisions and unexpected compassion. The drive to Uncle Rob's house was quiet, my mind racing with all that had happened, and all that was still to come. My father's recovery would be a long, difficult road, one he would have to choose for himself. I couldn't save him. I could only offer support when he was ready to save himself. For now, I had secured my home and created a path forward that would eventually free us both from the weight of his addiction. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild what had been broken, to heal wounds that had festered for too long. As I pulled into Uncle Rob's driveway, I took a deep breath, preparing for the conversation ahead. It would be painful, honest, perhaps even brutal at times, but necessary. Like lancing a wound to allow the poison to drain away, leaving room for clean, healthy growth. My father was waiting on the porch, his face haggard, but his eyes clearer than I'd seen them in months. Perhaps the shock of nearly losing everything had finally broken through the fog of his addiction. Or perhaps he was simply ready to confront the demons that had haunted him since my mother's death. Either way, I was prepared to stand beside him, not as an enabler or a victim, but as family, because in the end, that's what remained when everything else was stripped away. The bonds that connected us, damaged but not destroyed. The love that persisted, complicated but enduring. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years, I could see beyond the next crisis, the next disappointment. I could imagine a future where my father was whole again, where our relationship was rebuilt on stronger foundations, where the shadow of addiction no longer darkened our days. It was a future worth fighting for, one step at a time. Sitting across from my father in Uncle Rob's small kitchen, I could see the physical toll his addiction had taken. The sunken cheeks, the trembling hands, the haunted look in his eyes, all testaments to years of self-destruction. Uncle Rob had tactfully made himself scarce, giving us the privacy we needed for this conversation, though I could hear him puttering around in the backyard, close enough if we needed him. I signed the paperwork this morning, I said, sliding the folder across the table. The apartment is in my name now. Only my name. My father nodded, not meeting my eyes. Vincent agreed to cancel your debt in exchange for a payment plan that I'll be responsible for. And you're banned from the Sapphire. All of Vincent's properties, actually. He let you keep the apartment? My father looked up, genuine surprise crossing his features. Why would he do that? What's his angle? I shrugged, still not entirely sure myself. He said something about recognizing the value of family and the destructive power of addiction. I studied my father's face. I think perhaps he's seen too many people like you, Dad. People who lose everything to the tables. My father flinched at that, his gaze dropping back to his coffee cup. I never meant for it to go this far, he whispered. After your mother died, I just needed something, a distraction, a way to feel something other than the grief. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. The first time I won big, 5,000 on a lucky blackjack hand. It was like electricity. For those few minutes, I felt alive again. I reached across the table, taking his trembling hand in mine. I understand needing an escape, but this, what you've been doing, it's not just self-destructive. It's been destroying us. Our relationship. The life we've been trying to build after Mom. Tears welled in his eyes, spilling down his weathered cheeks. I know, he choked out. God, Olivia, I know. Every time I walked into that casino, I told myself it would be different. That this time I'd walk away when I was ahead. That I wouldn't chase the losses. He shook his head. But once I sat down at the table, nothing else existed. Not you, not your mother's memory, not even my own self-respect. Just the cards and the chips and the desperate need to win back what I'd lost. His raw honesty broke something open inside me, a reservoir of pain and anger I'd been holding back for years. Do you have any idea what it's been like for me? My voice cracked. Coming home to find the utilities shut off because you'd taken the money I left for bills? Bailing you out of jail after that bar fight last year? Lying to friends about why you missed important events? I took a deep breath. You weren't the only one who lost Mom. She was my mother. But I lost my father too, piece by piece, hand by hand, as you disappeared into that addiction. My father's face crumpled, grief and shame warring in his expression. I've failed you, he whispered, in every possible way. I squeezed his hand, the anger draining away as quickly as it had surged. No, Dad, you haven't failed me completely. You've stumbled, fallen, made terrible choices. I looked into his eyes, needing him to understand. But you're still here, still fighting, and as long as that's true, there's hope for us. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of unspoken pain hanging between us. Finally, my father straightened his shoulders, meeting my gaze with a determination I hadn't seen since before my mother's illness. I want to get help, he said quietly. Real help this time, not just promises. Not just temporary fixes. He swallowed hard. I've been talking with Rob. There's a residential treatment program he found. 6 months minimum. It's intensive. But I think that's what I need. Hope fluttered in my chest, fragile but persistent. I'd heard promises of change before, seen temporary improvements that inevitably gave way to deeper spirals. But something felt different this time, perhaps the concrete nature of his plan, or the quiet resolve in his voice. The program costs money, I said, thinking practically. And you'll need somewhere to live afterward, a way to rebuild your life. My father nodded. Rob's offered to help with the program costs. And he hesitated, seeming almost embarrassed. I still have my carpenter's tools in storage. The skills don't just disappear. I could work again, once I'm stable. I remembered my father in his workshop when I was a child, crafting beautiful furniture with patient hands, the smell of sawdust and varnish filling our garage. Before gambling stole his passion, he'd been talented, respected in the community for his craftsmanship. The thought of him returning to that work sparked a cautious optimism within me. One day at a time, I said, echoing the phrase I'd heard him use during previous attempts at sobriety. But real recovery means facing what you've done, Dad. Making amends where possible. Being honest, with yourself and with me, about the damage your addiction has caused. I know, he replied, his voice steadier now. And I will. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust, Olivia. Even if it takes the rest of my life. In that moment, looking at my father's weathered face, I saw glimpses of the man he had been before grief and addiction had hollowed him out. Strong, reliable, loving. The road ahead would be long and difficult, with no guarantees of success. But for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that he might find his way back to himself. To us. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, appointments, and preparations. True to his word, my father entered the residential treatment program, facing his demons with a courage that both surprised and moved me. I visited when permitted, bringing books and small comforts. listening as he shared insights from therapy and group sessions. Watching him struggle through withdrawal, face painful truths about his behavior, begin the slow process of rebuilding his sense of self. Meanwhile, I focused on securing my apartment legally and financially, setting up the payment plan with Vincent's organization, and trying to restore some sense of normalcy to my life. Maya had been invaluable throughout the process, handling the legal complexities with efficiency and compassion. But it was Elena Romano who truly surprised me, becoming an unexpected ally and, gradually, a friend. She appeared at the bar one evening about a month after my meeting with her father, sliding onto a stool during a quiet moment between the after-work crowd and the night owls. "How's your father doing?" she asked without preamble, declining my offer of a drink with a small shake of her head. "Better than expected," I replied, leaning against the counter. "The program seems to be helping. He's present in a way he hasn't been for years." I studied her face, the question I'd been holding back finally breaking free. "Why did your father help us?" "The real reason, not the sanitized version he gave me." Elena's lips curved in a knowing smile. "My father is a complicated man," she said after a moment. "The public sees the casino owner, the businessman, the intimidating figure who collects debts and makes problems disappear. But there's another side to him, one shaped by his own history." She traced patterns in the condensation on the bar top, her expression thoughtful. "My grandfather was a gambler. A serious one. He lost everything, their home, his business, even his wedding ring. My grandmother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table while he chased the next big win." Her eyes met mine. "My father was 9 when his father disappeared one night after a massive loss. They never saw him again." The pieces clicked into place. Vincent's unexpected empathy, his insistence on banning my father from his establishments, his comment about recognizing the destructive power of addiction. "So when he saw my situation," I began. Elena nodded. "He saw echoes of his own childhood. The difference is, your father is still here. Still trying. My father respects that. The willingness to face your demons instead of running from them." She reached into her purse, pulling out a small envelope. "Which brings me to why I'm here." She slid it across the bar. "Open it." Inside was a check, made out to the bar's scholarship fund for $25,000, half the amount of my father's debt to the casino. I looked up at her in confusion. "My father told me about your arrangement," she explained. "I'd like to match his contribution to the fund. Consider it an investment in second chances." Before I could respond, she stood, smoothing her designer dress with practiced elegance. "And Olivia? My father may have helped because of his past, but I'm helping because of what I've seen in you. Strength, resilience, compassion, even when it's difficult." She smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through her polished exterior. "Nama, those are qualities worth supporting." As she walked away, I stood frozen, the check still in my hand. Tangible proof that even in the darkest situations, unexpected light could find its way through. The casino owner's daughter, the gambling addict's child, both of us shaped by our parents. Choices but determined to write our own stories. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. 3 months into my father's treatment program, I received a call from his counselor, asking if I would participate in a family therapy session. "James has been doing excellent work," she explained. "He's reached a stage where confronting the impact of his behavior on loved ones is essential to his continued recovery." I agreed, though anxiety churned in my stomach as I drove to the facility that Saturday morning. The counselor, Dr. Marsh, met me in the lobby, a serene woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "This won't be easy," she warned as she led me to a small, comfortable room, "for either of you. But it's necessary, both for James's recovery and, I believe, for your own healing." My father was already seated when we entered, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He looked different, thinner, but somehow stronger, clear-eyed, present. He stood when he saw me, an uncertain smile flickering across his face. "Olivia, thank you for coming." Dr. Marsh guided us through the session with gentle firmness, creating a space where painful truths could be spoken without judgment or defensiveness. My father spoke first, detailing his understanding of how his addiction had affected me. The financial strain, the emotional abandonment, the betrayal of trust. He didn't make excuses or minimize his actions. He simply acknowledged them, owning his responsibility with a humility that brought tears to my eyes. When my turn came, I found words for feelings I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. The exhaustion of being both daughter and caretaker, the grief of watching him destroy himself, the constant fear that I would lose him completely, the anger at being forced to parent my own parent, the guilt that somehow I hadn't done enough to help him sooner. "You were never responsible for my addiction," my father said when I finished, his voice steady despite the tears tracking down his cheeks. "Never. That burden was mine alone, and I'm so sorry I made you carry it with me." He reached for my hand, hesitant, giving me the chance to pull away. "I didn't. I can't change the past, Olivia. But I swear to you, I'm doing everything in my power to create a different future for us both." It wasn't a magical healing, a Hollywood moment where all wounds were instantly mended. But it was a beginning. Honest, painful, necessary. As we hugged goodbye at the end of the session, I felt something shift between us. Not forgiveness, exactly. That would take more time, more evidence of lasting change. But perhaps understanding. And with understanding, the possibility of rebuilding what had been broken. The months that followed brought small victories and inevitable setbacks. My father completed the residential program and transitioned to outpatient treatment, moving into a small apartment that Uncle Rob helped him furnish. He found work at a local furniture restoration shop, humble employment that nonetheless allowed him to use his carpentry skills and provide for himself modestly. He attended meetings daily, worked with his sponsor, made amends where possible. Some days were harder than others. The urge to gamble never completely disappeared. He was honest about that, but he developed tools to manage the cravings, to recognize the triggers, to reach out for help before the impulse became action. I maintained my boundaries, supportive but cautious. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be restored overnight. But gradually, as days of sobriety became weeks, and weeks became months, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of his recovery. To hope for a relationship not defined by addiction and its aftermath. 6 months after my father entered treatment, I received an unexpected visit at my apartment. It was early evening, the spring sunlight lingering as I prepared dinner. The knock at the door was hesitant, almost timid. When I opened it, my father stood on the threshold, holding something covered with a cloth. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I wanted to give you something, a small token. For everything." I invited him in, curious. He placed the cloth-covered object on my dining table with careful hands. "It's not much," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But it's a start." When he pulled away the cloth, I gasped. It was a jewelry box, similar to the one my mother had given me, the one that had been carelessly tossed into cardboard boxes the night my father had tried to surrender my apartment. But this one was different. Handcrafted from rich walnut, with intricate inlays of maple forming delicate vines and flowers around the edges. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every detail lovingly rendered. "You made this," I whispered, running my fingers over the smooth wood. He nodded, watching my face anxiously. "At the shop, after hours. My boss let me use the tools and scraps." He swallowed hard. "Open it." Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, lay my mother's wedding ring, the one I thought had been lost years ago, sold or pawned during one of my father's desperate attempts to recoup gambling losses. "How?" I asked, tears blurring my vision. "I thought it was gone." "It nearly was," he admitted. "I took it to a pawn shop 3 years ago. But I couldn't. I couldn't go through with it, so I kept it hidden, telling myself I was saving it for a real emergency." He looked down at his hands, worker's hands, now clean and steady. I realized in treatment that I was really keeping it as a last resort, my final chip to cash in. He met my eyes. "But it was never mine to gamble away. It belongs to you now, along with her memory." I lifted the ring, feeling its familiar weight. The last tangible connection to my mother, returned to me by the father who was slowly finding his way back to himself. To us. Thank you, I said simply, knowing the words were inadequate for the complexity of emotions surging through me. We sat together for dinner that night, talking about ordinary things. His work at the shop, my plans to expand the bar's scholarship program with Elena's contribution, a movie we'd both been wanting to see. Nothing momentous. Just father and daughter, sharing a meal, present with each other in a way we hadn't been for years. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. I know I can never fully make up for what I've done, he said quietly, the pain I've caused, the trust I've broken. But I want you to know, Olivia, every day, every minute I stay sober, it's not just for me, it's for you. For the relationship I almost destroyed. For the chance to be the father you deserve. I hugged him then, feeling the solid warmth of him, the strength returning to his once hunched shoulders. One day at a time, Dad, I whispered. That's all either of us can do. Walking back to my dining table, my mother's ring gleaming in its new home, I thought about the strange journey that had brought us here, how my father's betrayal, the moment I thought I'd lost everything, had ultimately become the catalyst for his recovery. How Vincent Romano, a man who profited from others' addictions, had helped create the conditions for my father to break free of his. Life rarely follows the paths we expect. Sometimes the deepest wounds lead to unexpected healing. Sometimes the people we believe will harm us become allies in our darkest moments. And sometimes, when we think we've lost everything, we discover what truly matters. The connections that sustain us, the resilience that defines us, the capacity for change that lives within us all. My father's recovery continues, one day at a time. Our relationship heals in the same way, gradually, imperfectly, with setbacks and breakthroughs. The scars remain, but they've become part of our shared history, reminders of what we've overcome rather than what we've lost. And in that journey, I've found my own healing, learning to set boundaries without building walls, to support without enabling, to forgive without forgetting the lessons hard won, to believe in second chances while protecting my own well-being. The scholarship fund, now substantially larger thanks to Vincent and Elena's contributions, has helped dozens of service industry workers pursue education and build more stable futures. My father volunteers occasionally, sharing his story with participants, a living testament to both the destructive power of addiction and the possibility of redemption. Vincent Romano remains an enigmatic figure in my life. Not quite friend, not quite adversary. Our paths cross occasionally through Elena, who has become a genuine friend. He never mentions our arrangement, never asks about my father's recovery, but sometimes I catch him watching us, my father and me, with an expression that might be satisfaction, or perhaps simply recognition of a cycle broken, a family preserved. The apartment that nearly tore us apart has become a sanctuary, not just for me, but for the community we're building. Weekly recovery meetings in my living room, study groups for scholarship recipients around my dining table, holiday gatherings that include Uncle Rob, my father, and sometimes Elena, all of us connected by the strange circumstances that brought us together. Life isn't perfect. My father still struggles some days with the pull of his addiction. I still wrestle with trust issues born from years of disappointment. But we face these challenges together now, with honesty and courage, no longer pretending or hiding or carrying our burdens alone. And in that truth, however difficult, we found a freedom neither of us expected. The freedom to be flawed, to make mistakes, to need help, to begin again. The freedom to love each other not despite our broken places, but because of them. Because it's in those very cracks that the light finds its way in, illuminating the path forward, one step at a time. If you're watching this and someone you love is struggling with addiction, know that recovery is possible. Not easy, not guaranteed, but possible. Document everything. Build your support network. Set boundaries with love. And remember that sometimes the darkest moments, the betrayals that feel unforgivable, can become unexpected doorways to healing. Because in the end, it's not about the debts paid or the possessions saved or even the wrongs righted. It's about the connections restored, the trust rebuilt, the love that remains when everything else is stripped away. And that is something worth fighting for, however long and difficult the battle may be. 1 year after my father entered treatment, I stood behind the bar at the Oasis, the upscale establishment where I'd worked for the past 6 years, surveying the crowd that had gathered for our annual scholarship fundraiser. What had started as a small initiative to help service industry workers pursue higher education had blossomed into something much larger, thanks in no small part to the unexpected contributions from Vincent and Elena Romano. The event had drawn a diverse crowd: local business owners, former scholarship recipients, regular patrons, and even a few surprising faces. Elena moved through the room with practiced grace, introducing potential donors to past recipients, sharing success stories with genuine enthusiasm. My father stood near the display of handcrafted items being auctioned to raise additional funds, explaining the techniques behind a beautiful walnut writing desk he'd contributed, his finest work since returning to carpentry. Watching him interact with potential bidders, his face animated as he described the joinery techniques he'd used, I felt a surge of pride. The transformation over the past year hadn't been magical or instantaneous. There had been difficult days, moments of temptation, the occasional sharp word when stress ran high. But through it all, he had remained committed to his recovery, building a new life piece by piece, much like the furniture he now created. "Quite a turnout," Maya commented, sliding onto a bar stool in front of me. "Your little scholarship fund is becoming quite the prestigious program." I smiled, mixing her usual gin and tonic. "Hardly prestigious, but we're helping more people than I ever thought possible." I glanced toward Elena, who was now deep in conversation with the owner of a local restaurant chain. Having connections to the Romano family hasn't hurt. Maya followed my gaze, her expression thoughtful. "Strange how things work out, isn't it? A year ago, you were ready to take Vincent Romano to court over your apartment. Now his daughter is practically running your fundraiser." I laughed, acknowledging the irony. Life takes unexpected turns. Sometimes the people you least expect become the ones who change everything. As if summoned by our conversation, Vincent Romano himself appeared at the entrance, causing a subtle ripple of awareness through the crowd. Despite his efforts to legitimize his business interests, his reputation still preceded him: the casino owner, the man whose name was whispered, in certain circles, with equal parts respect and fear. He stood for a moment, surveying the room with calculating eyes before spotting Elena and making his way toward her. "Speaking of unexpected," Maya murmured, raising an eyebrow. I didn't think he'd actually show up. I hadn't either, though Elena had mentioned extending an invitation to her father. Vincent had maintained a polite distance since our arrangement regarding my father's debt, allowing Elena to be the primary connection between his world and mine. His presence tonight suggested something had changed. I excused myself, making my way around the bar to greet him properly. Elena caught my eye as I approached, a hint of surprise in her smile. "Olivia, you remember my father?" she said, performing unnecessary introductions. Vincent extended his hand, his grip firm and businesslike. "Ms. Mitchell, an impressive event you've organized." "Thank you for coming," I replied, matching his formal tone. "And for your continued support of the scholarship program." He nodded, his gaze moving past me to where my father stood. Something flashed in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or some private calculation. "Your father's work?" he asked, gesturing toward the writing desk. "Yes," I confirmed, a protective instinct rising within me. "He's been working with Hartman's restoration for almost a year now. They've recently promoted him to lead craftsman." Vincent's expression remained unreadable, but he nodded again, seeming to come to some decision. "I'd like to speak with him if you don't mind, and with you, privately, afterward." Before I could respond, he moved through the crowd toward my father. I started to follow, but Elena caught my arm. "Let them talk," she said quietly. "My father's been reflective lately. I think he has something important to discuss with both of you." The cryptic statement did little to ease my concern, but I trusted Elena enough to wait, watching from a distance as Vincent approached my father. The interaction seemed civil enough. No raised voices, no obvious tension. My father appeared surprised initially, then increasingly engaged as the conversation continued. After several minutes, they shook hands, and Vincent gestured toward a quiet corner of the venue, where the noise of the crowd was less intrusive. My father nodded, then looked around until he caught my eye, beckoning me to join them. "I'll take over the bar," Elena offered, reading my hesitation. "Go. This is important." With a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, I made my way to where the two men waited, an unlikely pair connected by circumstances none of us could have predicted a year ago. "Vincent has a proposition," my father said as I approached, his voice carefully neutral, but his eyes conveying a complex mix of emotions. Vincent waited until I was settled before speaking, his tone matter-of-fact. "I've been impressed by the success of your scholarship program, Ms. Mitchell, and by your father's commitment to his recovery and his craft." He paused, allowing the statement to stand without elaboration. "I'm in the process of renovating the conference facilities at the Sapphire. The current furnishings are dated, not in keeping with the image we're cultivating." My puzzlement must have shown on my face because he continued more directly. "I'd like to commission your father to create custom furniture for the space. Conference tables, credenzas, perhaps some accent pieces." His restoration work at Hartman's has caught the attention of several of my associates. I stared at him, struggling to process the unexpected offer. "You want my father, a recovering gambling addict, to work in your casino, the place he's explicitly banned from entering?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended, but Vincent seemed unfazed. "The conference facilities have a separate entrance, away from the gaming floor," he explained. "And James would be there during business hours, supervised, with specific deliverables and deadlines." He glanced at my father. "It would be a significant commission. Career-changing, potentially, if executed well." My father cleared his throat, meeting my gaze steadily. "I've told Vincent I need to think about it. Discuss it with my sponsor and with you." The simple statement, the acknowledgement that he wouldn't make such a decision alone, without considering the potential impact on his recovery and our relationship, spoke volumes about how far he'd come. "There's more," Vincent added, turning back to me. "The scholarship program you've established. I'd like to formalize the Sapphire's involvement, create an endowment that would guarantee funding for at least 10 recipients annually, in perpetuity." The offer was staggering, far beyond the annual contributions he'd been making through Elena. "Why?" I asked directly, voicing the question that had been lingering since that first negotiation in his office. "Why invest in my father's recovery? In the scholarship program? What do you get out of this?" A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's lips. "Let's just say I'm diversifying my investments. In people, rather than just properties." It wasn't really an answer, but I sensed it was all I would get for now. "We'll consider your offers," I said finally. "Both of them, but we'll need time." Vincent nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Of course. Elena has my contact information when you're ready to discuss details." With that, he excused himself, rejoining his daughter across the room. My father and I exchanged glances, 1,000 unspoken questions passing between us. "Well," he said finally, a hint of his old humor breaking through, "that was unexpected." I laughed, the tension dissolving. "Understatement of the year, Dad." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching Vincent and Elena navigate the crowd with practiced ease. "What do you think?" my father asked eventually. "About the commission, would it be a mistake?" The question held layers of meaning. Concern about his recovery, about returning to the environment that had nearly destroyed him, about whether I trusted his strength enough to support such a decision. I considered carefully before answering. "I think it's not a decision either of us should make tonight. It deserves thought, consultation with your sponsor, maybe a meeting with Dr. Marsh." I touched his arm gently. "But I also think you're stronger than you were a year ago, more aware of your triggers, more committed to your recovery, and I trust you to make choices that protect that recovery, whatever they may be." The relief and gratitude in his eyes told me I'd said the right thing, acknowledging his growth while recognizing the complexity of the situation. "Thank you," he said simply, "for believing in me again, even when I didn't deserve it." The fundraiser continued around us, the energy of the room building as the silent auction drew to a close and the live bidding began. My father's writing desk eventually sold for 3 times its estimated value, the winning bid coming from, of all people, Vincent Romano himself, who simply nodded in acknowledgement when announced as the buyer. Later that night, after the guests had departed and we were cleaning up, Elena approached me with a small envelope. "From my father," she explained, handing it to me. "He asked me to give you this privately." Inside was a key and a business card with an address written on the back, an address I recognized as being in one of the city's most desirable commercial districts. "What is this?" I asked, confused. Elena smiled, an enigmatic expression reminiscent of her father's. "A storefront. Vacant for about 6 months now. Prime location for a small business." She paused, watching my reaction. "Perhaps a craft furniture showroom? Or a bar with a more philanthropic business model? The lease is paid for a year. What happens after that is entirely up to you." I stared at the key in my palm, speechless. It represented possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. Expanding the scholarship program into something more sustainable, perhaps creating employment opportunities for recipients after graduation, maybe even building a business that combined my hospitality experience with my father's craftsmanship. "Why?" I asked again, the same question I'd posed to Vincent earlier. Elena's answer was more direct than her father's had been. "Because sometimes people deserve second chances, and sometimes those second chances need a little structural support." She squeezed my hand. "Think about it. Talk to your father. The space is yours, regardless of your decision about the commission." In the weeks that followed, my father and I explored the storefront together, measuring spaces, discussing possibilities, cautiously allowing ourselves to envision a future neither of us had anticipated. He met with his sponsor and with Dr. Marsh, carefully weighing the risks and benefits of accepting Vincent's commission. I researched business models, consulted with Maya about legal structures, and spent long evenings with Elena, learning from her business acumen. The decision, when it finally crystallized, felt right in a way few things had since my mother's death. We would accept both of Vincent's offers, the commission and the endowment, but with clear boundaries and structures in place to protect my father's recovery. He would design the furniture in the storefront space, away from the casino environment, visiting the conference facilities only for installation, and with a support person present. And the storefront itself would become restoration, part showroom for my father's furniture, part community space for recovery meetings and scholarship recipients, part cafe operated by program graduates. A place of second chances, built on the foundation of our own. The grand opening, 6 months later, drew an eclectic crowd, recovering addicts and casino owners, bartenders and business moguls, craftspeople and academics. My father stood proudly beside the ribbon, his 1-year sobriety chip gleaming on a simple leather cord around his neck, a tangible symbol of his journey. "I never imagined this," he confessed quietly as we prepared for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "When I was at my lowest, convinced I'd destroyed everything good in my life, I couldn't see any path forward. Couldn't imagine standing here with you, building something meaningful together." He looked around at the space we'd created, the warm wood tones, the comfortable seating areas, the display cases showcasing scholarship recipients, achievements alongside his furniture. "You saved me, Olivia, not just from Vincent or the gambling, but from myself, from the despair that told me I was too far gone to change." I shook my head, emotion tightening my throat. "You saved yourself, Dad. I just refused to give up on you. There's a difference." The ribbon parted beneath the ceremonial scissors, applause erupting from the gathered crowd. As we welcomed people into the space that represented our new beginning, I caught sight of Vincent Romano standing slightly apart from the others, observing with his characteristic, inscrutable expression. Our eyes met briefly across the room, and he inclined his head in a gesture that might have been approval, or perhaps simply acknowledgement of debts finally settled, accounts balanced in ways that transcended mere financial transactions. Later, as the celebration continued around us, Elena joined me by the window overlooking the street. "My father says the writing desk you created looks perfect in his office," she remarked casually. "Not the conference room. His personal office. He says it reminds him of something his mother once owned, before they lost everything. The comment illuminated so much about Vincent's involvement in our lives, the personal history that had led him to intervene when he could have simply claimed my apartment, the memories of his own father's addiction that had perhaps motivated his strange investment in my father's recovery. He never really explained why he helped us, I said, voicing the thought that had lingered for over a year now. Elena considered this, swirling the sparkling water in her glass. My father doesn't believe in explanations, she said finally. He believes in actions, in results. In balancing scales that most people don't even realize have been tipped. She turned to face me fully. But if you're asking whether his help came with hidden strings, ulterior motives, I don't think so. Not this time. She glanced toward my father, who was explaining the joinery techniques on a display cabinet to an attentive group of visitors. I think he saw something worth salvaging. In both of you. And my father has always had an eye for value where others see only damage. The insight stayed with me as the evening wound down, as the last guest departed and my father locked the door behind them, the keys to our new venture heavy with promise in his hand. We stood together in the quiet space, the reality of what we'd built still sinking in. So, he said, a hint of wonder in his voice. We did it. I nodded, surveying our creation, this physical manifestation of recovery and renewal. We did. But it's just the beginning. He smiled, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. One day at a time, right? One day at a time. I agreed, leaning into his embrace. The journey from that night on my front porch, locked out of my own home, betrayed by the person I should have been able to trust most, to this moment, had been neither straight nor easy. There had been setbacks along the way, moments when my father's resolve had wavered, when my own trust had faltered, when the weight of rebuilding had seemed too heavy to bear. But through it all, we had discovered resources within ourselves and connections beyond ourselves that had sustained us. The unexpected alliance with Vincent and Elena. The steadfast support of Maya and Uncle Rob. The community of recovery that had embraced my father. The scholarship recipients whose lives were being transformed alongside our own. In the process, we had each found strengths we hadn't known we possessed. My father had discovered that his capacity for creation was stronger than his compulsion for destruction. I had learned that maintaining boundaries didn't mean closing my heart, that supporting recovery didn't require sacrificing my own well-being. Together, we had built something neither of us could have created alone. A physical space, yes, but also a new kind of relationship. One based not on dependency or obligation but on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from falling apart and finding the courage to rebuild. 3 years have passed since that confrontation on my front porch. My father remains sober, one day at a time, his craftsmanship now sought after by clients far beyond Vincent Romano's casino. The scholarship program has expanded to support not just education, but also housing and healthcare for service industry workers pursuing better futures. Restoration has become a cornerstone of the community, a place where second chances are not just possible but expected, where transformation is celebrated in all its messy, imperfect glory. Vincent Romano still maintains a certain distance, though Elena has become one of my closest friends. The debt that once bound us has been settled in ways that transcend financial transactions, through changed lives, renewed relationships, and the ripple effects of unexpected compassion. My apartment, the home that was nearly lost, has become just that again, a home. A sanctuary filled with pieces my father has crafted, each one representing another milestone in his recovery. The jewelry box containing my mother's ring sits on my dresser, a daily reminder of what was almost lost and what was ultimately found. If you're watching this and struggling with the aftermath of betrayal, whether from addiction, deception, or simply human frailty, know that healing is possible. Not perfect, not painless, but possible. Document everything, yes. Protect yourself, absolutely. But also remain open to the possibility that rock bottom can become a foundation. That what seems like an ending might actually be a beginning. Because sometimes the greatest betrayals lead us to our greatest strengths. Sometimes the people who hurt us become catalysts for transformation we never imagined possible. And sometimes, when all seems lost, we discover resources within and around us that can build something far more beautiful than what was broken. This is the lesson my father's gambling addiction ultimately taught me. That rock bottom isn't a place to stay, but rather a place from which to rise. That addiction may have the power to destroy, but recovery has the power to rebuild, not just what was lost, but something stronger, more authentic, more deeply rooted in truth and possibility. And that, perhaps, is the most unexpected gift of all, discovering that our deepest wounds can become our greatest teachers, our darkest moments can lead to our brightest futures, and our most painful betrayals can ultimately guide us home to ourselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.